Principal of Fitcham and Associates. We have Nikki Chambliss in the house as well. A lot we're going to cover, including data and how the market is doing. We have an appraiser who is a small business owner who previously worked for Albemarle County as an assessor.
Right.
So this guy knows the, how would you characterize it before the show starts? I'd say is fairly nuanced in all aspects of valuations of real estate.
We try to be.
Don't you? I think that's fair.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, you did it from, now you're doing it in the private sector. You previously did it for a jurisdiction. While there are probably similarities, there are also probably some differences with what you're doing. Maybe we should highlight those on the program.
Sure. Happy to talk about it.
Because that would be something that, frankly, I don't know, and I would love to pass that knowledge on to the viewers and listeners. Nikki Chambliss, how was your weekend today?
Oh, it was great. It was wonderful. We had a gig out at Child's Peach Orchard. I'd never been there before.
Place
It's
is
an
awesome.
amazing place. Oh my gosh. So many people and very family friendly while being able to have loads and loads of fun. Can't wait till it's cool enough at an evening or afternoon to have that fire pit going. So yeah.
I love it. Keith, you ready to rock and roll over there?
I am ready. I am. My blue pen is furiously writing numbers down.
Fresh from a significant bike ride for charity, Keith Smith.
Yeah. I had a great. Thank you for all those who donated. Woody would be one of them. Thank you for the cystic fibrosis. Raised about $800. Put it 45 miles in, and PR'd it, man. It was really good.
Multiple people putting in the feed if we're going to talk food again today, maybe at the back end of the show. That was a highlight of Friday's show. We have much to cover before we get there.
That was probably one of the funnest times we've had here. That was a lot of fun.
Most fun for sure. Sydney Snoddy, hello. Bill McChesney, hello. Croze, welcome to the program. Joseph Gentile,
Hey,
watching the program. We love you, Joe Gentile.
We were talking food, Joe, on Friday. Where were you?
Joe Gentile's our brother from another mother.
Absolutely.
Judah, we can rock and roll, my friend. Good Monday morning, guys. I'm Jerry Miller, and welcome to Real Talk with Keith Smith. Thank you kindly for joining us. A pleasure to connect with you guys through the I Love Seville Network, a show presented by Yes Realty Partners and Keller Williams Alliance. A lot to cover on today's program, a show where you, the viewer and listener, can offer perspective and shape the discussion by leaving your comments, your questions, your ideas, your thoughts in the comments section of any of the social media platforms you're watching upon. The show literally airs across every social platform known to mankind, long-form content that cannot be duplicated in this market in any capacity. Judah Wickower is the director. If we could go to the studio camera and let's welcome our panel of experts. Keith Smith, you've assembled a talented panel today.
You know what? I love it when we have talented folks at the table here. I can sit back and learn and just have a good time. So apparently I'm not still trying to learn here. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's great to chat. I was talking to Woody off air before we went in our pre-production meeting. We get asked all the time, how's the real estate market as real estate agents? And I can't wait to ask him that same question. So.
Woody Fitcham, jump in here. How's the market moving and shaking?
It's changing for sure. I mean, we're certainly seeing transition in some of the outer rim markets, and we still have a very strong market in the internal markets, though. I mean, Charlottesville City, the right around the county, and all, it looks like it's doing pretty good in Albemarle still.
Nikki Chambliss, what are you seeing over there?
Truly, it's the same thing. It's one of those where it's kind of nice because it's, buyers who had been, I'm just going to hold off. They're like, now's my time. If they're good with this interest rate, now's a good time to hop back in.
Interest rates, 7.3, 7.35, depending on your credit score. So let's do this. Woody Fitcham, your background and your expertise is quite impressive. How about a snapshot of Woody Fitcham, the professional?
Wow. Real quickly, been doing this almost 25 years, so I've had different jobs in valuation over the couple of decades I've been doing this. I did a 6-year stint in municipal work and also state work, having worked at Albemarle County as what they call the assistant assessor. Everywhere else, that's a deputy assessor. but I also held that position in Suffolk, and then also was a staff appraiser for the City of Newport News as well. And after all of that, I went up to the state for a year to work as the principal conservation and historical facade easement reviewer for tax credits for the tax department. So, and then went back into private practice in 17. Prior to that, I was in Virginia Beach and owned my own firm. So that's it in a nutshell.
You're also being a bit
Super humble right now.
super
Yeah,
humble.
super
here.
humble.
You also are nationally known, and you write for national organizations, and you
Right.
help national organizations. So you are a bit of a rock star, and we're thankful to have you here.
I appreciate that.
And you're being super humble. One of our sponsors, Pearl Certification, you wrote a report from. You set up their whole appraisal system to go ahead and verify that
Right.
if you do that, you actually do gain 5%. You want to talk a little bit about that, how that actually
Oh
works?
yeah, we finished that up. I don't know, 6 or 7 months ago now. It was a white paper. It's the second one that I worked on. One of my mentors, Sandy Adamatis, actually 5 years ago did what I just did with them, writing the white paper, and I was working with her on that as one of the researchers and appraisers. But basically, we've now done 2 studies with Charlottesville as the centerpiece, because Charlottesville is really on the cutting edge as far as the green technology goes for homes. Our market's very accepting of that. And with Pearl being headquartered here, we've done it here. But this last study we did was more of a national study. We looked at Charlottesville, Boston, Phoenix, and I believe Lansing, Michigan, if I'm not getting that wrong. So it was another place in Michigan anyway.
Someplace a little colder than
Oh yeah, for sure. And we saw across the board pretty much a 5% was the overall. I mean, that's the aggregated difference. Each market's a little different. Charlottesville still tends to be, I think, the higher market for it because we have actual consumers walking around looking at homes asking about Pearl certifications and HERS scores and things like that. We're not seeing that in a lot of markets yet.
So the reason I brought that up is I weekly look at the weekly car footprint, what comes, so that's all the 6 jurisdictions that surround.
What's CAR stand for?
Charlottesville Associate. Oh God, I got screwed it up. I screwed it up. Charlottesville Area Association of Realtors.
There you go.
Thank you.
Very nicely done.
We did a whole show about that on Friday. Still didn't get it right, but I look at these numbers, right, and why Pearl is important. And Nikki, I'm going to kick it over to you here in a minute. Last 7 days, ending today, 84 units, new homes came on the market in this footprint, but 64 went pending. So that's a 30% delta, not roughly, exactly 20 units different. 2 months ago, same week, it was 80 came on, 90 went off. So we're actually, the inventory that we've been talking about forever to come on the market is starting to come on the market. The pendings are slowing down a little bit. Nikki, how important it is from a seller's perspective to have something like Pearl certified? What's the impact on that? And are we getting this pendulum, in your opinion, switching over back in the buyer's favor?
Is it a buyer's market? That's what you're asking.
No. That's my answer to that. The easy answer to that is no, it is not. And having something like Pearl certification on your home, when your home has these green features, is incredibly valuable. That 5%, that's a bigger picture. And in our area, because it is so not only accepted, but also valued, my off the top of the head guess would be that it's probably higher depending on the home. I know that I helped a seller sell a home, I think it was 2020, that had solar panels. And that was a huge value to the buyers who bought that home. It was a very huge value overall of the people who were interested in that home. So I think having that extra aspect that says, hey, not only is this a value, but this is why and this is how, and a professional has evaluated this. You don't have to take the seller's word for it. That's a really big help and boost in that situation.
So to your point on the buyer's market not happening, and we're going to talk about this here in a
Got
minute.
multiple people asking about that, including Rosalind Brown, saying, why is it not a buyer's market? We're seeing price reductions everywhere. As folks that are looking at buying houses, is it not a buyer's market because the interest rates are so high? Great question, Rosalind Brown.
So we're going to take a dive into that, but Woody and I had a conversation off camera. I just pulled the last 7 days, what's sold and what the DOMs are. The days on market, and the median is 7 days. So I'm going to jump in a little bit later on for my impact or my opinion on that. But Woody, you're looking at something else now, which is seller concessions, which really intrigued me. And
Right.
so you want to talk a
They're
little
back,
bit about
baby.
Yeah, they are. I mean, they never really went away. We've always had seller concessions in most markets, but as I'm trying to figure out exactly, because that's the one thing we don't know. When does the pendulum switch from seller to buyer market? And I think concessions is a good indicator for that. There's two things with the concessions you got to look at. How many of the total sales you're looking at in any given market have concessions, and then what's the amount of those concessions. You can't usually go over 3% on most,
Sure.
because, conventional lending regulations won't allow it. But, for the longest time, we were seeing maybe, 10 to 15% of the transactions having, overall transactions in any market having concessions. And then they were ranging somewhere between, like 0.75% up to about 1.5%, 2%, depending on the market. We're seeing a return to the 3% level now, and we're getting closer to the 25, 30% overall volume. I think that's a very important metric to look at because it means the market is softening, because your net sales price is your sales price, right? It really comes down to what's really the seller netting out of the sale, and if they're paying concessions, then you got to count that. And then you also have to look, I think, at days on market, and you also have to look at. I don't like median sales prices. I think median sales prices can be a little misleading because you may not be necessarily looking at anything that's really comparable in that stack of information. I like price per square foot.
Really?
I love price per square
Yeah.
foot.
And as a
They hate price per square
Yes,
foot. The
well,
realtors
we're not a
hate
fan.
it.
well, as a recovering builder and
As a
developer,
businessman, I
really
love
hate-
price per square
I
foot.
really hate it.
It's an easy
It's
metric
just
to
not
talk
great.
about.
Yeah, it's easy to talk about, but how valuable is that information? Depending
I mean, it's
on-
valuable for what I do.
Okay.
Well, there's one extra step to it that most people don't do. You have to take
There's
the.
always the extra step.
This guy's bringing fire right
Yeah.
here. I love it.
You want the
I love this guy.
residual price per square foot. So if you're dealing with any property that has acreage, you got to pull the land value out of it. So the price per square foot of the main improvement on the property, that's usually going to be a good indicator.
So what you're saying is you got to work a little bit harder, not
Yeah.
rely on what's here. You're going to have to take
Yeah.
a deeper dive, segregate out, create your own data metrics, and go ahead and get into
This guy's a pro.
Without doubt.
Yeah.
But as the regular human beings, people that are not, superstars
Right.
on that end of it, this is the data we have to rely on at the moment. Nikki, seller concessions. Explain to the folks what that is and
Oh,
why
gosh.
that is impactful.
Well, so seller concessions is a whole group of things, and the first thing that comes to my mind when I'm thinking of, okay, what is a big thing that I've worked with people, it's rolling and closing costs, right? So if you want to finance a home, there are closing costs associated with that whole process of buying a home. When you roll that in, what you're doing is you're basically saying, hey, this is the price I'm willing to offer. I'm going to add in the amount of estimated closing costs to that, and that's going to equal the total offer I'm making to a seller that gets financed, knowing that part of that is going toward those closing costs. That's a big one that's really helpful for buyers and went away in a very huge way over the last 2.5 years. So, and not that it didn't happen at all, because it did, but it was very, very rare. You also have things that are negotiated in the home inspection that end up being a credit to the buyer. There are all sorts of things that can be concessions. Those are the two top ones that come to mind for me. What comes to mind for you guys?
So those are pretty much the same thing. I think the big conversation about is what Woody said is you're actually, even if the list price is X and you're doing seller concession, you're really buying the house for that amount of money
Right.
less.
Yes.
And that is a conversation that we have with buyers and or sellers all the time, that your net, as a seller's perspective, is going to be less, whatever that math is. In your world, does that skew valuations at all?
Well, I mean, that's one of the.
That's a good question.
Okay, so we're going to get a little nuanced here.
I love this.
Nuanced is
I-
good.
I
Let me
love
sit-
this.
I apologize.
let me
I
sit-
love when Woody comes on the show,
We're
dude.
going to sit back.
Dude, you're good.
So there are two types of adjustments that we do as appraisers. The first set are called transactional adjustments. Transactional adjustments are going to be things like time adjustments or market condition adjustments. How's the market changing over time? So if I'm using a comp 6 months old, we're adjusting it forward to whatever the current market is. And this microphone, I cannot talk with my hands. I like to talk with my hands. The other ones would be concessions. So yes, we do a dollar for dollar reduction for whatever the concessions are. So if someone's paying $5,000 in concessions, that comes immediately off. There's 5 of those total that will get pulled out, and then everything else after that's called property characteristic adjustments. So that's when you get into the square footage differences, the quality difference, the condition difference.
So that's that very deep dive, but from an MLS perspective, right? Does the concessions take into consideration? Or, so in other words, when I show a sold recorded, is the sold recorded less the concessions in that, or does it include the concessions?
Oh, it includes it.
So that's the point I'm
Yeah.
trying to get at. So there's two very different data
Right.
sets of numbers we're looking at, and that could impact you at the time of buying, right? So if we're buying a home that's at list price and we're doing a 3% concession, but your appraisal's taking that out, it may screw up the deal because we're not hitting the numbers. Does that make
Actually,
sense?
I cannot count on one hand. I can't recall any transactions
You
that
can
I've
talk
ever
with your hands,
appraised.
but I'm part Italian. It's okay. I get it.
We've never not undervalued. We've never not supported a transaction because of concessions.
Okay, got
What
it.
it could impact is certainly comps on the street.
Absolutely.
And thank you. That was the point I was trying to make.
Well, in a market like we're in right now, where we're kind of soft right now, it's a soft seller's market, or softer than it was. You're looking at absolute sales price. You're not looking at the net sales price.
Sure.
So as the amount of concessions increase, the data could look a little funny because of it.
So
Yeah.
it didn't matter when it was double-digit year-over-year
Right.
appreciation. Now it's going to be more of the normal, the single digits, low single digits, I think, year-over-year.
How about this comment from, first off, this guy should come on the show more often. Second off, Miles Hamrick says, Woody is the visible authority of real estate.
Oh, Miles, my brother from Charlotte.
Miles Hamrick, literally saying that about you. Jeff Brown giving you props. Viewers and listeners, put your comment in the feed. We will relay it live on air. You, the viewer and listener, can interact with the show, and your comments will be heard on the show. Is it a buyer's market? How close are we to being a buyer's market?
We're still a ways from it. Inventory shortages are preventing us from hitting the other side. Buying power has diminished
Because of rates.
because of rates. I think we're going to head into a buyer's market, but again, my crystal ball is still a little murky right now.
How
But,
close?
I don't think we're going to be in a buyer's market in the next couple of months unless something shifts majorly in the economy.
Yeah.
Do you want to take a stab at that?
Well, no, I agree. I agree with everything you just said. And I just want to go back to a point when we were talking about the concessions. One of the things that I want to make sure people know and realize is that when your realtor is doing a market evaluation for you, doing that CMA for your home, they're factoring that in when they're comparing homes and values. And then also when you're selling your home and your realtor is presenting information to you, that's another part of that puzzle. When you're comparing offers, those concessions get factored in to the offer and weight of the offers being presented. So these are things that we do look at on a day-to-day basis.
So I often refer to the market as the Olympic size pool, that you have the 10-meter platform. I actually checked it this weekend to make sure I had the depth right. It's 16 feet deep. And the other end of it is 3 feet deep, right? So the lower end is the sellers, the larger end is the buyers. So what has happened now, instead of 16 feet deep, it's 14 feet deep, right? And the 3-foot pool has gone from 3 foot to 2.5 feet. So the volume of buyers are just so prolific right now that I think it's going to be a long time before that pendulum swings over that way. We were talking off air. I've been using this term hyper-local market. So I think there's going to be certain areas and certain subdivisions and certain sections of certain areas that pendulum is going to swing a lot faster. Some of them maybe not so much. Are you seeing any of that?
Hyperlocal, I love it. I want to mention real quick Don Clark, who's an appraiser, who is one of my mentors down at Tidewater. When I took a lot of classes coming into the business, he passed away a couple months ago. He was a medic in the armed forces. Great guy. But he used to, in 101, when I started taking it, to talk about hyperlocal, he would say there's 5 factors in real estate that are really important for residential. Location, 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 is it connected to water, and is it on water? Those were the 5 things that we needed to be
I
most
may have
concerned
to
about.
steal that from him.
Yeah, that's excellent. Absolutely love that right there. Nikki, jump in here.
Oh my gosh, no, now I'm thinking about water. I'm sorry. My brain just went back to Saturday. Not that I was by water, but that feels like a Saturday vibe, you know?
Oh, definitely.
Though if you're in the Tidewater area, being right next to water also has a lot of other factors, which thankfully in our area,
You're
we're
talking
not
about
thinking about
domestic
those.
water.
Well, the first water is yes. Are you hooked to public?
Oh, I'm
And the
sorry.
second-
My
Water
brain-
for the house.
And the-
Y'all, I
no,
was
you're
at the
right.
beach.
You're right. The second one was, are you on
Okay.
actual water that you can, like Lake
See, I
Anna
figured
or
like that was
someplace like
important enough to have it twice, just like location.
So-
but I guess being connected to water is also
So-
solid.
Why is that? Why is waterfront so much more prevalent or valuable?
Because there's not much of it.
Yeah, it's very finite. Like any finite resource in the market, the demand's always going to outpace supply. So that's one of the reasons. And I mean, let's be honest. We live in a society where your status in society is looked at by what you own and what you like to buy and what you use. So, I mean, I don't know how much you guys do at Lake Anna, but I mean, the market out there has been ridiculous for the last 2 years.
Yeah, but it hasn't always been that way, right?
No.
Like, and much like Wintergreen, right?
Oh, for sure.
It's very much so roller coaster ride out there, where some of the other areas a little bit more stabilized. On
Isn't
that.
Lake Anna a little bit more insulated than Wintergreen, though, when
Yes.
difficult times
Yes, it
arise?
is.
It usually is, yeah, but both markets are results of discretionary spending. So, I mean, you're looking at folks coming in from DC and places like that to go to Lake Anna and Wintergreen as well. Wintergreen, a lot of folks get involved in the short-term rental market up there, and that's been a long-term, short-term rental market. And, folks think they can be landlords up there, and
Yeah.
when the economy goes the wrong direction, that's if you've got to make a choice between keeping your rental or keeping your primary residence, the rental goes. People will liquidate them or even let them foreclose because they can't afford to keep them.
Michelle Bailey Rogers is giving them props from Irvine, California. 5 states on the show right now, which I think is a reflection of this man right here, Woody Fincham,
Without doubt.
on the show right here. Do you want to give a shout out to your fans over here, Woody Fincham?
Oh, for sure. Michelle, thanks for tuning in. That's awesome. It's very early where she's at right now. So
It's approximately 7:30, and she's watching Woody Fincham on Real Talk with Keith Smith right now, which I think is fantastic. So more folks are asking literally in the feed. Nicholas Erpy, welcome to the program. Grayson's watching the show, and he says, what would take us to buyer's market, Woody Fincham?
so
Then he highlights DOMs and the price reductions.
absolutely. Well, DOM. I mean, I think Keith, you like to be somewhere around what about what is it? 180 days.
It depends on who you talk to, right?
Right.
My analysis, based on being in this area for 3.5 decades, when you start approaching 60 days on market, when you
Okay.
start getting north of 45, 50, that pendulum is moving. It's the matrix that I use, but I'm super excited about digging into the concessions thing, because I think we have to look at new ways of looking at this
Right.
that we've not done in the past.
Where are we at now?
Oh, well, it depends, right?
How about car footprint?
So car footprint, year to date, we're at 5 days.
Well, no, current.
That's current. That's as of today.
The DOM you're saying DOM in
The
October, the median is 45?
No, so year to date.
Okay, well, how about October?
Oh, I'd have to dig that up here real quick while somebody's talking. I can surely do
All
that.
right.
Okay, go ahead. What were your thoughts on what Keith was saying, or what Grayson was asking as far as buyer's market? What would swing us there?
So, of course, being on the market longer than 30 days, 60 days, or whatever it's going to be. Going back to DOM, now that I'm thinking about it, I think everybody here's familiar with what relocation is. When a
Yes.
corporation's going to move, an employee they want to keep, they'll move them to a new market. So they'll come in and guarantee to buy the property. The ERC Council, Employee Relocation Council, there's a whole sector of the real estate industry that works in ERC. And when we're doing appraisal work for them, they usually cut it off at 120 days. So we have to start what's called forecasting. We have to figure out, well, what's this thing going to sell for if it has to sit on the market for 120 days or more? Sometimes you'll get it at 90 days. So somewhere between 90 and 120 days, I think, is probably the industry accepted number. But like Keith's saying, keeping
Yeah.
it hyper local, maybe 60 or 70 is probably better.
I can just look, because I ran these numbers going all the way back to 2002. The highest the median. So this is another median days on market in the car footprint. The highest was Give me 1 minute. 76, and that was in 2008.
That makes
Right.
sense.
Right? So, really when we start approaching this,
So 76 was worst case scenario. That was the recession
That's
in
the-
2008.
Yeah,
That's
so-
the peak. So that would be an anomaly, an outlier, KPI.
correct. So the reason I'm doing 21 years, it takes every one into consideration. 2002, just to put it in perspective, was 25 days, right? And we really didn't stop dropping below 30 days until 2016. We were at 2017, 24 days. So we're a long way away if we're using days on market
Yeah.
as a metrics. And again, I don't have your genius by any stretch of the imagination, but this to me is a very simple way to follow how the market is trending. To me, it's all about absorption.
Well, that's where the news media, I think, gets real twisted, is that, they're always hyper-focused on one or two things. They never, they'll talk about absolute sales prices rather than looking at the percentage change. Or, they love days on market, too, for the same reason. I think our conversation over the last couple of weeks, Keith, off camera, has been all about concessions and days on
Yeah.
market and all these other things that we're looking at, because I think you got to have multiple metrics to make it work.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out get
Yeah.
Jerry's answer here. I'm not that fast with the fingers and the brain and the
Well, what do you
talking
think? We could
also.
probably do a rough estimate for October. I'm sure we
I'm
have
going
the
to
back
get
of
it.
the
I'm
napkin.
literally going to get it for you here in a few minutes.
Your fantastic wife watching the program right now, Lori, we're giving you a shout out here. Creighton Cross, welcome to the program. Melissa Bear, Ernie Ramos, Megan Perry of Ness is watching the show.
Oh, wow.
Folks of Log and Foster on the feed right now. Real Estate 3 on the feed right now. Kevin Yancey, we'll get to your comments here on from Waynesboro here in a matter of moments. Kevin Higgins and Greenwood, we'll get to your comments here in a matter of moments. Nikki Chambliss, thoughts on what Woody Fitcham is dropping here, the knowledge he's dropping?
Well, it's wonderful, and I love it, and it's really nice to have this appraiser side of things. And I think in our industry, we try really hard to find balance in that, and sometimes it's challenging, whether it's because everybody's so busy or just trying to make schedules work or whatever that may be. And I love that we have this and have this so regularly. So Woody being here is such a huge value, like to me, to all of us, to the listeners. I have my agents, I'm like, hey, go listen to that show. It was really awesome. Woody was on it, and they're like, Woody, and I'm like, yeah, the appraiser guy, just trust me, go listen to it. I don't, it's like when you're trying to get a kid to get their shoes on to go out the door, it's like, just do it. I promise you, it's worth it. I don't have more words today. It's a Monday, right? But I think when we're talking about this market and what it would take to like knock it into a buyer's market, I feel like this is very similar to the conversations we were having, I don't know, over the last year of what would it take? And it would take something really big and outrageous and out of our control to change something like today, tomorrow, the next day, right? Over time, we're gradually moving. The market is softening, and we'll see whether or not that just levels out or whether we switch over to that buyer's market or not in the near future. But like what he was saying, that's not a right now thing.
I mean, the thing that's obviously working against the buyer's market is the rates getting so expensive. I mean, that is keeping the
sure.
buyer's market from happening.
I think it's the inventory more than that. I could just only speak to the last several sales that
Yeah.
I've done
Yeah.
that were first-time home buyers, and they really didn't care about the rate because they've got in their brain that they will refinance it in 2 years. Now, if that's going to happen or not, it's a different story.
Sure.
Yeah.
But they have in their brain that this is going to reduce up to 2 points within a certain period of time, and it's more about being able to get the home that they want, where they want it, with the features they want in it, and that's, again, our tempo is picking up, quite frankly, on
Yeah.
the buyer side of people wanting to do that. To answer Jerry's question, last 30 days of the median days on market in the 6 jurisdictions. This is single family attached and detached, no new construction because we always take that out as excuse.
This is October?
This is the last 30 days from
okay.
today going backwards. Is 10 days. Median sales price is $393. Your square foot is 208. Average days on market is 24. So average days on market is 24, and I guess we can pull out, I don't know, from your perspective, is it better to look at detached or attached or combine them together?
I like to separate them because you usually have two different consumer groups looking at them. The other thing we got to talk about too is absorption.
Yep.
One of the most important things that an appraiser uses and agents use as well is what's called an absorption analysis. And that's looking at over a period of time. Most people will do 12 months, but I think as the market's transitioning, you have to get shorter and shorter with the periods of time, maybe a quarter, maybe even a month sometimes.
So you're taking your absorption with snapshot from 12 to 3 months? Did I get that right?
Well, we look at, well, like I mentioned to you, we're looking at Wintergreen right now because
Sure.
we have a project there that we're working on, and the condo market appears to be declining now. It has just started to decline. And we looked at it at 12 months, and we go, the line's flattening, so there's something going on closer you get to right now. So we shortened it to 6 months. Definitely a curve down a little bit. Went to 3 months. Absolutely a curve down. There was no, it's like, when we talk about the last couple of shows, we've talked about the hockey stick effect when, when pricing was going up, monthly, almost double digit in some markets. That's a hockey stick effect, right? You'll have a linear line go like this, and then all of a sudden it just goes up like that. Now we're starting to have that happen because that market in Wintergreen is now just transitioned over the edge. So
single-family detached, same footprint on that end of it. 189 units sold in the last 30 days. These are closed units. 9 days on market. 405 is the median sales price, but the median list price was 410. So we're about $5,000 less, and that very well might be your seller concessions possibly showing up into it or not, depending on how this data is looking at. The averages, which I'm starting to look a little bit more at, is 23 days on the market on that end of it. So there's a little bit of a delta between the two, but we're right at 9 days, and I just think we're a long way. When that median starts getting to like 30 days, then I think that pendulum is really moving.
How about this question from Steven for Woody? Is there a softer portion of the market? For example, the jumbo loans that Keith and Jerry like to talk about. Which portion of the market is the softest?
Right now, the outlying markets geographically are probably the softer markets. Jumbo loans, we do a lot of jumbo work, and I don't see much transition in that market at all. You're talking about a consumer group that can almost write a check for everything that they purchase. They might get a loan because they're enjoying the tax write-off for it, or that's what they're doing from an investment strategy. But yeah, if you look at any of like Farmington, Glenmore, any of those markets, I don't see any negative transitioning in any of that market. Anything that's giving me any concern yet, anyway.
So you're saying that the not that we want to name a specific area, but the way I explain it, have been explaining it, is that prior to now, let's say last year, the rubber band was stretched way out, and the circumference was huge, right? And if you were in that circumference, it didn't matter. Now I look at it more shaped like a pear, right? It's more closer to around Charlottesville and kind of pokes its way up to Waynesboro and Augusta County. Are you kind of seeing the market that way in some of the areas that are outside of that are getting a little softer?
Yeah, Buckingham, we've done a bunch of work down there the last 6 months. That's definitely transitioning to a negative side. Again, Wintergreen. We're starting to see some things in Louisa starting to taper. Nothing real concerning in Louisa yet, but it is a market that is in transition. All markets are in transition.
Louisa, not Spring Creek, Louisa?
No, Spring Creek's Charlottesville. It's really not part of the main agrarian part of Louisa, because once you get past exit 136, you're in Louisa's two different worlds.
Well, Zion Crossroads is its own area,
Yeah,
basically.
for sure.
It is its own micro market, separate of Louisa. And Louisa, I feel like over time has some nice stability in that it's in that triangle of DC, Richmond, and Charlottesville. Because I know I always had clients who were really surprised going in the rural areas that are northeast of Charlottesville. They thought that maybe they could get a deal, and this is years ago, but it wasn't the deal they thought, because going northeast, you're in that triangle, and it does add some stability because of the creep or the vacation home at Lake Anna or all of those things that factor in.
Right.
So it's interesting, same 30 days, only 28 attached units sold. versus 189 single-family detached, and the median days on market for those 28 attached homes was 18. So it's double what the. So I think you're starting to see maybe a little bit of a softening on that. But these are so minute, incremental changes that. It's hard to develop a trend over time.
The attached market's weird too because there's more new construction competition there because a lot of the builders have, they've seen this coming for a while, and their economists and the folks that drive their investment strategies are very astute. They knew what was going to come, so they've really been concentrating on that more dense.
So I bet you if I switched that from new construction, that number would jump.
I bet it would.
Quite high.
What are you talking, DOM?
Well, they don't have DOMs, unfortunately, because they put them in as zero.
Yeah.
Right? They skew that, but the volume of units is probably much greater if we switch it to new construction. And I'll do that while somebody's chatting.
What do you think, Nikki?
We have an area that, this is not necessarily data backed, but just the overall perception. We're in an area where people lean toward wanting a detached home. And attached, or just they've been increasing over time, like we're talking about. There are many more that are new builds, but that's more out of necessity, not so much because people are just dying to have an attached home.
Right.
But so if you go to Richmond, you can find a lot more attached homes. You can find so many more homes with smaller square footage. But when you're in Charlottesville, if you're trying to go below a certain size home, you're finding some older homes in the downtown area, and that's about your main options there, unless you're moving to attached. And even then, our market for attached, a lot of that's been built in the more recent years. It's just not something that people had wanted as much.
So it's actually less, 21.
Really?
So
Oh, wow.
in the last 3
I'm
days.
surprised by that.
0 days on market
Yeah.
because they don't plug it in. Interesting, $459 is the median sales price
For the new.
for the new versus
Interesting.
$340 for existing.
Wow.
And here's and you'll appreciate this, Woody. The difference is our system doesn't segregate out duplexes versus townhomes. So these duplexes, right, these villa homes are considerably more. They're basically single-family detached with a mating wall in the middle, and you actually have a yard and all that stuff. So they don't segregate out, which I wish they did. Townhomes. I mean, we could create our own to do that, but automatically they should put those. There should be a separate category.
Yeah, there should be. I mean, when we're looking at them, we call them semi-attached.
Semi-attached.
And not only just in the duplex style, but when you get into the row home style townhouses, the end units typically are going to compete more like those duplexes do than the interior units do.
Oh, big time. That is much more valuable to the buyer.
Good question here from Jamie Turner for Woody Fincham. Does the appraiser always know the contract price, Woody?
Most of the time we do. It's a good piece of data to have. Obviously, an appraiser should not be trying to support the contract for the sake of supporting it, but it is a piece of data. Nothing tells me more about a property than one that's been exposed openly to the market. It's been on for a normal period of marketing time, and you've got a willing and able buyer, and everybody's knowledgeable, everybody's doing what they're supposed to in the transaction. That's a data point to consider because that's what that property's going to be absorbed into the market at. Like we saw in this big run-up we've had the last 3 years or 4 years, we can't always, as an appraiser, support what the contract's going to be, but it's definitely worth consideration because the market that we're in now anymore. I mean, when I got started in the business, you could say consumers weren't really that well informed.
Oh, yeah.
They're over-informed now. They know more about the properties than almost anybody in the transaction anymore when they're coming into it. So, thanks to the things like Zillow and RPR and things like that, I mean, they know everything they need to know.
Well, I have some experience in that, and I've found particularly, I had a home inspection before I had to come here to do the show, a young professional couple, and they've really put that phone down now. They've used the phone to kind of figure out where their where was, right, and some basic setups on it, but they are trusting the trusted advisors
Right.
to get from this point to the actual closing table and close. So Woody, we have a bunch of realtors. Did I say that right?
You pretty close.
Pretty close. Anyway.
Lori Alexander giving them props. John Phelan giving them props. Faith Hawkins giving them props.
Oh, wow.
So real estate agents, I'll pivot that because I just can't seem to do that. So what one piece of advice would you give the real estate agent as reference to what you do to help the process along? What kind of reach out would you want to do there?
I mean, just be transparent with them and try to give them good advice in the sense that, it's not about facilitating the sale. It's about helping them make a life decision. I mean, this is for a lot of folks the biggest investment they're going to make. Or at least up to this point in their life, it's the biggest investment that they're making. So I think it's super important to make sure that they're fully informed, they're aware. There's pros and cons to everything. Don't always be rose-tinted glass kind of person, or sunglass kind of person. Like when I'm doing a market analysis, I might be in one of the best neighborhoods in the area, but there's always a drawback to wherever you're doing your analysis at. So it's good to just have that full 360-degree conversation with them, I think.
So what are you thinking, Nikki?
Oh, I agree. I love that so much because I think sometimes it's easy for people to go all sorts of directions. That's not that nice balance in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's it's their decision. I'm going to step back. And there's not enough conversation and communication around the home or the purchase process because of, hey, it's their decision. Absolutely, it's their decision. You're not buying a house. But when you're walking around a home with a client, what are you seeing? How are you talking about that, right? Because you want to be able to share good information in a way that's valuable to your client. And you don't want to be an alarmist in any direction. You don't want to be like, oh my God, this is the one. That's their decision to make. And you actually might want to try to talk them out of it just a little bit to make sure there's not buyer remorse. You also don't want to be, oh my gosh, this thing's falling apart, unless it really is. And then you should get out the house, right? Because I've been in a couple of those where I was like, oh, what? How about we not keep walking through this? So
the show is on fire with buyers and sellers here. How about this one from Sally Ann? She's saying, we're thinking about listing our house. What advice does Woody have for coming out of the gates with a price point? The realtors have a certain price point. What's the price point advice that an appraiser would offer? That's a great question.
So we actually do get hired all the time to do this. I mean, a lot of agents actually hire us, particularly when they get into difficult properties. Like, I've got an agent that's brought us into a transaction down in, how do you pronounce Schuyler? Is it Schuyler?
Schuyler is how I pronounce it.
I never get it right as a person who's come here
but
from
I can't
someplace
say
else.
Realtor, so.
So, very difficult transaction. So, and, they want to make sure that they've
Why?
looked
Because
at
it
all
has
the
a lot
data.
of land?
It's multiple parcels. It's an older improvement. It's not a contiguous piece of property. It's an interesting case study. So, sometimes sellers will hire an appraiser to do that, but I mean the best thing to do is to look at what's actually competitive to your property that has sold recently, and then also look at what's come on the market that's active right now.
So let's define recently, because we get these questions all the time. Hey, my next door neighbor sold their house 6 months ago.
Right.
And this is a very different market. So in your world, what do you define as recently?
Well, it depends on the property. So if we're talking about like an attached a townhouse at Pavilions at Pantops, I want to be in the last 30, 45, 60 days. Yeah. If I'm in Farmington, I might be looking at one of the big estates there. I might need to be looking at 4 or 5 years worth of data.
Because the volume of turnover there is so low.
Right.
Right. And versus the townhomes, and that's where the numbers gain
exactly
matters, right? If there's only one that's sold in a year, it's pretty hard to use that as an
right.
average. Even an old Marine can figure that one out.
When I get asked this question too, I always tell folks, go to the open houses that are happening in your market, because you want to kind of see what the properties look like that are being absorbed. You got to pay attention to actives right now too, because that's going to be your active competition when you list. So once you put that for sale sign up, whatever's active at that point is competition. So you've got to understand where your product fits in that whole market.
Oh yeah, and knowing the actual competition, not just the photos that are online, because those are not the same. I've even had conversations with appraisers before where I was like, hey, I know that you use this home as a comp. I was in that home and this home and this home, and this particular home is not what it seems to be. And they really appreciated that input, which was really nice. So they're not just what they seem to be online. Sometimes they're better,
I do photography as a hobby, and what you can do with editing software is unbelievable.
That's actually a ethics violation. If we know that that has been done, that's actually an ethics violation. You are
What's
not,
that?
So you are. It is ethically not allowed if you are a. Go ahead and say
A realtor.
Thank you.
I
To do that, and if you get caught doing that, that's a huge no-no.
Well, so
Yeah.
those listing photos, your MLS photos, those are supposed to represent the actual home that is being sold, right? And so while there is an amount of editing that is normally accepted, sometimes the wide lens use, it really skews a property.
It can, yeah.
Sometimes the level of editing misrepresents a property. And you want to be really careful that you're using a photographer that knows how to do that and do that well and is willing to take feedback.
Well, and be frank here, like our whole business is managing perception. That's what we do here. If you are branding a property with photography that's not indicative of what the house actually looks like, you're setting your sellers up for a nightmare or a recipe for disaster. Because once people step foot on the property, they're going to say, oh my God, this is not what the pictures look like. And their first perception is going to be a bad one.
And that's why
This
you
is marketing 101.
and that's why you hired.
I learned this at UVA as a second year.
Well, that's just
Literally.
That's just called being a mensch, just being a human, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, you're not you should not be deceitful in what you're doing. That's why Brandon Harrop is such a. We love using him because he will not do something like that. He would turn the project down before if somebody said.
Well,
"I need you to-"
photograph editing ethically is supposed to, even because you're telling a story whenever you're taking a picture. This is the photographer in me coming
like
out.
this.
You edit because a camera can't pick up the same way your eyes do. I mean, what God created or evolution created for us picks up beautiful colors and all of that. That's what editing's supposed to do. It's supposed to make it more like that. It's not supposed to make it hyper reality.
It's amazing when you start showing properties.
alternate reality.
And inevitably, somebody will say in the very beginning of it, "Oh, this looks just like the photos," or they'll say, "Oh my God, this looks nothing like the
Yes.
photos."
Right.
On that end of it.
Ryder Mall giving you some props. I believe he's an appraiser.
Yeah, Ryder works with a good friend, a good colleague of mine in Midlothian, Heather Placer. That's his wife, and she's a great commercial appraiser.
Timothy Evans, another appraiser, giving you some props right now. Bill Garber, watching in Montclair, giving you some props here. More questions coming in for Vitcham
nice.
here. Fast and Furious. Jamie Waller from Loring Woodruff. We'll get to here in a matter of moments. We love you, JW. Jamie Turner says, does Woody take into consideration updates that have been made? If so, which updates would be recommended for the highest return on investment? Turner, the mayor of Gordonsville, purchased quite an exquisite property in Culpeper, and if you remember, he's the real estate investor with property in Gordonsville.
Right, I remember, yeah.
Yeah, so he's asking the best ROI for updates, and do you take into consideration updates that have been made?
We absolutely do look at updates, but they have to be the right updates, and that's always that's the magical question, right? So you got to look at the market that you're in. Again, I hate using these generalizations, but you got to keep up with the Joneses, right? Pay attention to what's sold in the market, what's active in the market, and you don't want to over-improve your property beyond that, but you also don't want to under-improve it below that. There's a magic spot in between the two things, and we see, like I live at Lake Monticello, and we live in a very middle-of-the-road colonial there, built in 2003. It's a nice enough home, but it's not, like one of the really, big properties or real high-end customs or anything like that. I'm not going to spend $70,000 on a kitchen remodel.
You
on that
price
home.
yourself out of it.
Yeah, I mean, what's the point? I will never
Tell
get.
this to my wife all the time. I hope you're watching, Mrs. Miller. Go ahead, Woody. I'm sorry for interrupting.
No.
Time changes that, though, right?
It can.
Time changes
It
that.
can. I mean, the market if you're going to be there for 10, 15 years, the market's eventually going to catch up to you because, in 15 years, whatever you've remodeled anyway is going to look.
It's going to be out of date now.
Yeah.
So,
Well, also there's the difference in the value in resale and the value of your quality of life, which includes having a happy wife. I'm just putting that out there.
Yeah, other ways to have happy wives, though.
Yes, definitely.
Throwing that out there
Your
as well.
negotiation skills are on point.
Yeah, Jamie Waller is making a joke here. She completely agrees about editing the photos. She says this is hilarious. Is it still acceptable for agents to Photoshop their profile pictures, though?
Oh, no, those aren't.
Oh,
Those
well,
aren't
the worst of it-
Photoshopped. They're just old.
that's it. Who was I looking? I was looking at one of our
was
fellow
I need
real
to update mine
estate
too, y'all.
agents,
Gosh.
and I looked at it, and it was a 20-year-old picture. I was like,
Yeah.
dude.
Like you're a whole
Updated.
different person. That was a lifetime ago. A whole lifetime ago. Yeah.
So, especially post the COVID market,
So-
right?
Okay. Yes. Well, and truly, like I still have a profile pick out on a lot of things with me having purple hair and it's short. I really need to update that, but I do kind of love it and it throws people for a loop. But you know,
if that works for you, it works for you.
Yeah.
So my 5 things are very different than your friend's 5 things on the real estate market. It's location, price, features, condition, and timing, right? That's and I've actually added a 6th one, which is getting me a little bit of hot water. Who's on the other side makes a difference, right?
Absolutely.
He's talking basically about which realtor's on the other side. That's what that means.
Oh, yeah.
right there.
That's what that means. It makes a difference.
Oh yeah, I mean the professionals that are involved with any transaction can make it smooth, or they can make it, chaos.
So I get this question all the time. I'm throwing 2 questions at you, Woody, today that we didn't prep you for.
Okay.
The why is what we're about ready to get into, where we're in the middle of shifting in our O shift, not a repeat of 08. Why is that the case?
Well, we're not.
Or do you think it is?
Yeah, we're definitely not going to. Any economist that I have any respect for and pay attention to, they're all using the term soft landing right now because we're not where we were. I mean, I don't think folks realize how close we were to going over the edge economically in 2008. We were really, really close.
What does that mean?
Well, General Electric, one of the largest at that point, the largest company in the world, couldn't get revolving credit lines to make light bulbs. I mean, when a company like that can't get financing to do their day-to-days, that's a problem. I mean, we had so much going on with what had happened with AIG and all of that, and everybody was panicked. But I still don't think the public realizes how real close how we got to that. We're not there now. I mean, consumer debt's not horrible right now. It is.
Massive equity in homes.
That's one of the other reasons that I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of problems, because most people that have moved, that wanted to move, have moved. There will still be people that need to move for various reasons, but if like I'm sitting on the largest equity I've ever sat on in a property in my life, in my
Same.
the property that I live in. So I have no intention of selling it. But if I were going to sell it, I'm in a much better leverage position than other sellers in the market who maybe don't have any equity in their property. So, I mean, when it comes down to it, those are the folks that are really going to control what happens in the resale market.
We should also highlight this phenomenon of the owners who locked in rates at, say, 4.5 and below. And because they have rates of 4.5 and below, which are close to 3 full points lower than what the rate is right now, these folks are likely not going to sell, because why would you sell at that point when your delta's 3 points,
Yeah.
which is going to diminish the inventory that comes on the market?
Yeah.
Well, they're not going to sell because typically they're going to stay in their home.
But they have no reason to sell.
Even if they would buy now, they have no reason to sell. The average buyer is going to stay in the home, depending on who you talk to, between 5 and 10 years. So
Right.
5 to 10 years from now, the market is going to be very different than that. What I was trying to talk about was the difference on appraisals,
Okay.
right? Because to me, that's a huge difference on what happened prior to 2008 and now that the safeguards are there that they were not there before. Can I talk a little bit
Yeah,
about that?
it's really changed. I mean, a lot of emphasis was put on the appraisal or valuation profession's been under a lot of scrutiny, and it really changed. When the Dodd-Frank Act went through, it really shifted what was going on for appraisers who do mortgage work. And it wasn't a great thing at first, because what had happened, a lot of banks kind of just disavowed themselves of working with appraisers directly, and they started working with appraisal management companies. That really, and that's not what you're asking. You're not asking about how it affected the appraisal business itself, but yeah, the scrutiny that's there now on what appraisers are writing, because the reports that we write now for residential loans are way different than they were back then.
Sure.
I mean, I was probably averaging 12 to 15 pages back then. I mean, it's not uncommon for me to throw a 60, 70 page report out
I know,
now.
I have to read them.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know any appraiser who's not, writing more and doing more to do it, because the banks are asking. They didn't care about collateral risk so much. They cared more about just closing the loans in 2006 and around that period of time. Now they really do look at the collateral, because they're like, if this loan goes bad, we got to do something with this. And, we're seeing some consolidation out with appraisal management companies and with mortgage companies. And you're seeing, I forget who it was on Friday, but it was one of the larger lenders. They're going out of business.
Yeah.
Is Amerisave? Is that what I'm thinking?
You're going to see a little bit more of that happen.
Oh, it's definitely happening. It's definitely happening. I mean, I know a lot of loan officers that have been laid off. I mean, that's the first, those are the first folks to go when the economy starts to do this.
So, Nikki, from your
Yeah.
perspective, why isn't this 2008?
Oh God, there are every reason possible. Truly, you're just not comparing. You're not even comparing apples and oranges. You're like comparing apples and nuts. We're in a whole different food group here.
Did you just call us nuts?
Not exactly, but it happens sometimes. I'm a little nuts. I feel like we're in the same boat.
We're in real estate. We have to
Yeah,
be.
about to
Very,
say,
thank
yeah.
you. We're all nuts being in the work that we do. This is just what it is, y'all. But truly, the loan requirements around things is a huge part of that. Our economy is just not in the same place. We also have a lot of value in homes that didn't exist before. Those are my top 3 reasons that I give when I'm having this conversation. And truly, it's just everything is different. I think the thing that is the same is that there are some alarmist headlines that happen a lot, and it does concern people. And that is a conversation that I know my agents are having on a regular basis with
Right.
clients and consumers of, hey, but I heard this on the news. And it's like, okay, hey, so let's take the headline, let's actually look at what it's saying, and what it's saying could also be concerning, except that it's talking about the broad picture, not our area, or except that it's leaving out this really important fact. That whole aspect of consumers being smarter than ever before, and they are, many of them know how to read that data well, but I do feel like one of our big important things that we bring to the table is the translation of that data.
Sure.
And a lot of times an article does not always either do that well, or it's only focused on one small piece. And there's so many pieces that come together to make all this work.
Michelle Bailey Rogers, Finance of America, is the one you were looking for, the lender.
That's
that
the
went out of
one.
business.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, the viewers and listeners are super, super smart on the show. And she also wants us to highlight the work remote dynamic and how it's created its own hiccup in the market. I would imagine what she's saying is, as we've become more capable of working remotely from an ISP in our basement, we're less likely to also sell our house, which is keeping less inventory for coming on the market. I believe that's what
Right.
she's saying there.
I think so, and that it scares me every time I hear a major corporation say they're bringing everybody back, because Nelson County especially got such a huge influx of folks moving. That high-speed trunk they've got going through there is the best thing they could have ever done.
No doubt.
Just luck and coincidence happening all at the same time. But what's going to happen when the employer goes, okay, we got to yank you guys back in, and you need to be in the office 4 days a week or 5 days a week.
What are you saying that's going to do to real
But
estate?
that's already happening, though.
It is, but not
Let's
to the
have-
degree.
Well, I've got several buyer clients of mine that are trying to sell stuff that's outside in the peripheral, that are trying to come
Really?
closer.
To their epicenter of employment.
Epicenter of employment.
Yeah.
That's pendulum is swinging. And I think
And I think the employee that's working remotely is more marginalized or more forgotten and potentially more vulnerable to getting pink slipped because they don't have the face-to-face with the employer. But what's the impact that has on real estate? Is that what you're alluding to?
Yeah, I think it's going to have an impact on it at some juncture. It has to. I mean, and here's the thing. This is anecdotal, really, but I meet people every day going in their homes at work, and everybody works at home now. I've never seen homeowners as happy as they are right now because they're at home with their kids, and because if they're an hour away for a commute, they don't have to get in the car. You've got to get up an hour and a half early just to get ready to go to work, and now you can get out of bed, put your kids on the bus, and then go to work. And because you can work in your PJs.
I just think you're going to start seeing that swinging, particularly
Probably.
as the recession takes a deeper dive into that.
I mean, Microsoft is
That's
laying
a
people
great
off.
point.
To Jerry,
That is a great
to
point.
Jerry's point, they're gonna, from a corporate perspective, it's always better to have the folks near you. Now, it's harder to manage somebody that's further away. I don't think it's going to completely go away, but I think you're going to see I think this time next year we'll be having a very different conversation.
I think you're
about
right,
the
and
impact
now that
on
I'm
the market.
rethinking it, because Powell, the way he's putting the accelerator down on wanting to stymie down the inflation issue, employment has
You're
got.
talking about interest rates.
Yeah,
rising.
unemployment's got to happen, and they're talking a few million jobs to make it happen. So, I mean, I guess
And to Jerry's point,
that's probably what's going to happen.
I think the people that are, and again, this is very general terms.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
you know, we're this is for
People
the-
not in the office are going to be the ones can first.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, you know, unless the math is different, right? Unless the company says, look, it's cheaper for Jerry to work from home than from in the office, and that might change. But by and far, you know, people that in the management business want to look people in the face.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Well, and sometimes I think that's not so much a matter of a business actually being run well. It's a matter of all sorts of other factors, including ego and
Sure.
and all sorts of other pieces, perception, which matters so very much, because a lot of times for that person who has a really good work from home setup, they accomplish so much more in the time that they have.
Yeah, but another thing to factor in is the business often owns the real estate, and they have to justify
Very much
the
so.
debt service on the real estate. And how do they justify the debt service on the real estate when they're not using the real estate?
It's not even ownership. Most commercial, because I do a fair amount of commercial,
Yeah.
and Woody, you do too, I'm sure. They're usually 5-10 year leases. So
Right, well, take Blackstone and BlackRock, who often drive the market. We hear about them macro. They own a city block of a tower. And if
Sure.
they have debt service on this city block of a tower, Blackstone and BlackRock, and they're not using that, and take it a step further, Blackstone and BlackRock own real estate massively as holdings.
yeah.
So if
well, you're
they
talking about
start-
that single family detached.
Of so
without
much
doubt.
real estate.
Without doubt.
I mean, if they start letting real estate get marginalized at the top of the pyramid, that's going to impact the holdings they have.
It's a weird world we live in anymore. I mean, between what's going on with retail and what's going on with office
When
space.
wasn't it weird?
I mean, this is the weirdest I ever remember it being in my career. I mean, you know, with the .com stores and all of that hitting in the
That's right.
retail. I mean, what's going to happen with all of that? I mean, you know, like with Fashion Square. I mean, I'm pretty sure Home Depot's coming in there. That's why they bought it. But I mean, other than Home Depot and Lowe's and a couple of other brick and mortar stores, most of those stores don't even need to be in the market in order.
Let me ask you a question. Do you buy most of your stuff online, or do you actually go to a store?
My
Great question for both of you guys.
My wife doesn't go in public anymore,
Got
so we buy everything online.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you, Nikki?
Everything.
Really?
In person, hybrid, because I can order it online and go pick it up. I'm about to do that with Lowe's because
Yep.
Lowe's is great, and I love the idea of having Lowe's and Home Depot. I'm just putting that out there. I will shop at both of them, and they both give military veteran discounts. So, and then I also shop online. So it really is a hybrid. And there are a lot of times where I will go online and I will place my Food Lion order to pick up later that day.
Oh, really? I'm
and
the old dude
you
in
can
the
do-
room.
But so there are two sides to that. The online option is a little higher priced, but it also keeps me from spending forever. I am not efficient when it comes to shopping. I will walk through, and if I have a list, I will still also shop by feel. If something speaks to me, or if I'm like, oh my God, I really want to have that. And so for me, ordering it and then picking it up is just a really smart thing. And I'm just not fast with those things.
So, while everybody's been chatting, I've been looking at Nelson County year over year.
Yeah.
From beginning of the year to now. Single family detached, no new construction. 178 units closed from January 1 to today. Last year was 239.
Yep.
Oh man. Yeah.
That's a huge difference. And
Did you leave
But the
Wintergreen?
price point went up,
Did you
though.
leave Wintergreen in?
no, I just took new construction out.
Well, I mean-
I could pull Wintergreen out if you want.
Yeah, I mean, Wintergreen is such a catalyst in
Okay.
Nelson as a
All right, I'll
whole.
pull Wintergreen out. You're the boss man, so
Yeah.
I shall do what you say, sir.
Well, that area is so rough because so many people did start that work remote conversation that we started with. Like I have two people I can think of right off that I helped buy homes that were switching to working remotely. And so they moved, they work in Charlottesville, but one person lives in Waynesboro and one person lives in Richmond. And they were very, very secure. We had some in-depth conversations and check-ins as we went through the process to make sure that they felt confident that they could buy further away than they would want to commute.
2021, if I put Wintergreen excluding it, it only drops 2 units. Goes to 237 from
Oh.
239.
What?
Yeah.
That doesn't seem right.
Well,
Agreed.
that could be.
The MLS,
Wintergreen
sometimes the
result.
MLS, it's like an old jukebox. You got to smack it once in a while to make it
You
work.
talking about me or the
Don't
jukebox?
talk about-
Yes.
I
yeah.
would, well, that's the problem with Wintergreen. There's different sections in it, right? So this is Wintergreen Resort, right? It could be. What's the one at the
Villages at Wintergreen? You got to exclude Villages at Wintergreen. That's the one.
Okay, there you go. That's probably going to make
Why
a
there are
difference.
two wintergreens?
I
I'll
got
never
two
understand.
friends that scooped up properties at Wintergreen for Airbnb and short-term rentals.
How's that
There you
going?
go.
They crushed it during the pandemic. In the last 60 to 90 days, we were having beers, and they were saying, it's not working so great anymore.
You know what?
You-
Can I
You're
ask-
1,000. By the
Oh,
way, you're
go ahead.
100%
Yes, we'll
right.
sit down and then I have a
145
question.
versus 239. You're 100%
Oh,
right.
yeah. Okay, so
Thank
the
you.
Airbnb life, because
where you're a genius.
that conversation still comes up regularly, especially as people are trying to still invest, and Airbnb is ideally a more profitable way to do that, right?
But
Yeah.
but isn't Airbnb market going to shift a little bit,
Well,
right, as
so,
we
yeah,
get
that's
into
why
the
I'm
more of the
asking.
recession?
I think so.
We're reading articles all the time about this.
That's what these guys said. People who don't have a disposable income or unwilling to shell out disposable income to take 3-day weekend vacations to Wintergreen.
And the flip side to that is because, my youngest daughter and son-in-law are coming back from Seattle here. In Seattle, they Airbnb just to offset the rent, the mortgage payment.
Right.
And that might impact the market a little bit if that starts going
Because it's
away.
unique from, say, the Outer Banks, where someone will go to the Outer Banks for a
Every year.
week.
Sure.
Yep.
Where at Wintergreen, they were getting folks that were checking in, taking a half-day Thursday
Yeah.
from work,
Oh.
driving from 2 to 3 hours away, coming there Thursday afternoon for cocktail hour, taking Friday off, and then leaving Sunday
Yeah.
afternoon to
Yeah.
make work by Monday.
The where is
Interesting.
going to matter on Airbnbs more than ever, right?
No
Absolutely.
doubt, 100%.
I have clients of ours that did Airbnbs next to vineyards, right? And they open up on like you just said, a Thursday to a Monday.
Right.
They pay their mortgage and then some.
Oh, these guys were paying their mortgage and then some. Like
That's
two
exactly right.
weekends, 2 long weekends were paying their mortgage.
And the
Then
rest-
they were banking money on one of the weekend, and then the other weekend they were using it for family.
And hopefully
Nice.
they were smart enough to take the bank money and start paying the notes down. Oh,
Well, and so here's my question though.
I know
because
that body language.
I feel like it's
don't
been
know.
so easy for
So if
people
you're
to have
doing that, little PSA for people, if you're doing that,
Slush
and
fund.
if you
Oh,
start
yeah.
paying your principal down, pay your principal down, pay your
Always.
principal down.
And save. Yeah.
Efficiency and how to manage these things is really going to take over the short terms.
Yes.
There's a lot of investors that are buying up, and when I say investor, I'm talking about a legitimate larger company coming in, not
Institutional investors.
institutional. Thank you. That's a better way to say it for sure. But a lot of folks who are doing, they saw it as an opportunity to jump in and be a small investor. They don't understand that when you're doing that, you're not just renting a property, you're running a business, you're running a
Yes.
hotel. So you've got expense ratios that run 30 to 40% on that. If you're not efficient with getting out and taking care of it, you have to hire someone to do it for you. And it's a profit margin game at that point. And if you're not doing it at scale, which these bigger companies can do, and they do very well, they're going to be the ones to take it over. I think we've got a bubble coming with short terms because
I agree
a lot of
100%. That's the reason I brought it
folks
up.
got into it and said, let's do this. It's a great thing to do. And it's no different than someone who's really good at throwing a party and decides they want to get in the restaurant business. You know?
Yes.
So as a
It's just like
recovering
that.
county appraiser, to Jerry's point that he's been making on a bunch of our shows and his show, when that Airbnb revenue starts going away from jurisdictions, it's going to put nothing but pressure on the budgets, right? Because I think you're going to start seeing that changing a little bit over the next 12 to 24
Well,
months.
this came up in the last city council meeting. The Commissioner of Revenue, Charlottesville City Commissioner of Revenue, made this comment. Folks are just sidestepping the taxes for short-term lodging by calling them, instead of the rental fee to rent the Airbnb, they're keeping those numbers really low because that was the tax exposure. Instead, they're calling it like a dog charge, or get the place back up to speed charge when the rental is done, like the cleaning cost charge.
Right.
So they were saying the fee was cleaning costs instead of rental of the actual space to sidestep the tax exposure. Do you see what I'm saying with that?
Very much
They
so.
found a loophole, whether it's correct or not.
City of Charlottesville just figured that, well, maybe the Commissioner of Revenue has known this for a while, but he just brought it to attention in the last City Council meeting.
That's irony at the highest I've ever heard it, because it's the same thing government does when they give you fees instead of taxes. It's fees are just taxes by another name, but we're not going to call them taxes because it's a fee to do something. That's what they're doing.
That's
with
what
that.
they're doing. They got smart.
Well, those of us who live in Lake Monticello are used to that.
Right. Oh yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
Are used to that. Look, it's you're 100% right. I mean, it's going to start impacting everything, but what's happening also with the Airbnbs is I'm finding out they're not on Airbnb anymore, right? Because they've been doing it so long, they pull it off of Airbnb,
Yeah.
and they have a client pool that they are fostering.
And you know why they do that?
Because they can't be traced.
That's right.
They can't
That's
be
why they're
traced.
doing it.
Can't be traced. Well, it's the second part of it is they also don't pay the fees to Airbnb, right?
Well, that's
they
going
get to keep a little
the
bit of
county.
their
The
money.
counties are going to get smarter though, and
But how
realize
do they
that.
enforce that?
Well, I mean,
Especially Charlottesville, who's
you
understaffed.
you have to advertise the property in order to get people to rent it. So if you're not going to Airbnb,
Oh, but that's not happening, Woody. What's
they got to
happening
go to
is-
private websites to do it.
Well, it's really very much like I can't believe I'm going to use these words. It's almost like a black market Airbnb.
It's
out
word
there.
of mouth.
That's exactly
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, it's word of mouth. Or it's the legacy tenant that says, "Oh, I had such a great time at this house. Let's just book it again next year."
So my wife and I go down to St. Martin.
It's like this. What we're doing with the executive office space.
We go down to Grand Cosse a couple times a year, right? It's an Airbnb, but we don't do Airbnb. I just call up Chantal directly and say,
Right.
hey, I'm coming on such, and she gives me a different rate than if it, actually, I think she charges me more. She gives Yona a discount and charges me more.
That's why Yona does the phone
I
call.
think that's exactly why Yona, plus she can speak French, so that kind of
That
helps
helps.
things out a little bit. I'm working on English. I promise you I'll get better.
Neil Williamson watching the program. What was on the mind over there, Nikki Chambliss? I see the wheels
Oh,
moving.
they're always moving. Gosh, no, I want to know what Neil is saying. Is it related to Airbnb stuff at all, or are we topic shifting?
Neil is sharing a link about the U.S. consumer work from home habits for 2022.
Okay,
So that link is in the comment
That's
section of
nice.
my Facebook page.
Okay.
Kevin
I see
Yancey
it now. Okay.
has a question that I think, Kevin, this might be more of a CPA question, but I'm happy to ask it anyway. He said he's got a ridiculous offer for his house in Waynesboro, ridiculously high, unsolicited. They've been there 5 years. How do we shield capital gains exposure if we take this offer? A legit offer from a real estate agent representing a buyer? That's more a question for a CPA. I don't want to speak for the panel here, but I would imagine you guys are going to pass this to the certified public accountant.
Yeah, so is it an investment property or personal
It's
residence?
personal residence.
Yeah, I think the delta on that,
You can't shield that one. You can't 1031 that one.
you can't 1031 that one, but you're more than likely going to buy something, and I believe, and we can surely double check this, and I got to talk to my CPA this afternoon, so I'll ask this question. I believe it's a married couple. If you're making more than $500,000, it's tax free, and if you're a single, it's $250. So if you're netting more than $500,000, should be good. But I'm going to double check that, and please check in on Wednesday, and I'll have that information for you on Wednesday.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
3 different people on the feed here. Same question. I think I know the answer to this, but I just relayed the questions to you guys. Is there a bubble on the horizon?
For real estate, residential real estate in general, I don't think so. I mean, what do you guys think?
No.
Maybe yes, maybe no yes. So hyper local is going to make a difference. I think if there's any bubbles, it's way out on the periphery of where we're at. As the market settles back into more normalcy, it'll be normal days on market, normal appreciation, normal so forth and so on. I think there'll be these micro little bubbles, little tiny, like the thing what is that thing you pop?
Oh, the bubble wrap.
Bubble
The
wrap.
bubble
yeah.
wrap, right? So it won't be all of the
Be all
bubble
bubble
wrap.
wrap.
It'll be some of the bubble wrap. So if you have, if your whole business model is built on Airbnb paying your mortgage, that bubble might pop on you,
No doubt.
right?
No doubt.
Yeah.
But if you are purchasing your first time home and you're going to stay in it for 10 years, that bubble isn't going to pop, right? It just won't increase double digits.
If you purchase in the peak of COVID and you have to sell your home immediately,
Then you're in trouble.
you might have a little
Yeah.
bubble popping for you.
Yeah.
Well, yes and maybe yes, maybe no yes. It depends on what the appreciation is between point A and point B. You may not be making all of that appreciation back, but you may be making some of it. Versus 2008, that needle went the other way and you were losing money.
Yeah.
And speaking of it, and I'm trying to catch up on my notes here, short sales, that kind of, you seen that activity picking up?
No, foreclosures and short sales are still not something we're seeing much of at all. I mean, there's always lender-owned sales in every market you look at, but they're really not impacting the market at all because there's such a small volume.
When you start giving a different answer than that, then I'm going to start getting nervous.
Yeah, I mean, me too. Me too. I mean, and the question you asked earlier, Jerry, too, the other thing we don't have in the market right now that we had in 2008 was all of the interest only and all the ARMs that were done. I mean, we put a lot of folks into products they just weren't sophisticated enough to understand, and
We are seeing more arms.
we are.
But these aren't like 1 year arms or 2 year arms.
Yeah.
These
7
are
and 10.
7 and 10.
I mean, you're seeing back in 2005, 2006. I mean, a lot of mortgage companies were putting people into really dangerous, very risky products.
Well, I think the challenge isn't that someone wasn't sophisticated enough to understand. I think the challenge was they weren't being educated, and that's a really important part of our role and a lender's role as well. And if they're
Sure.
not doing that well, shame on them.
Or maybe they've been listening to the news that you've been talking about a little bit
That
too
totally
much.
happens, yes,
And jumped all
yes.
over that.
I remember the story, or I relayed the story when I bought the villas at Southern Ridge in 2007. The lender, and I won't say which one, and that lender is not in business anymore. I said, let me think about it in his office. And then he followed me out to the parking lot, put the paperwork on the hood of my car, said, if you don't sign now, this is going to be on the table tomorrow. The paperwork on the
Yeah.
car.
Wait,
Wait,
And
what
that's
year
just-
I
was
was in
that?
my
Holy
mid-20s. That was
smokes.
2007.
What kind of used car were you
Okay,
buying?
yeah.
I was
Right,
buying a
for
house.
real.
I know.
Yeah.
But to your point, it felt so slimy.
And we
Kinda-
wonder why people
And I
are
said,
hesitant
"Get me the hell
to
outta
be
here."
Yeah.
them as trusted advisors.
Get me
Like,
the hell out of here.
Well, you know, my story I tell all
Wow.
the time, 2004, 2005, when I was doing developments, I'd have bankers walk in my office and say, hey, I heard you're doing a $10 million deal. I'll lend you money at negative 1 to 2%. In other words, they were paying me money. They wanted to offer me to pay me money to borrow $10 million. And that's when I tell them to get the bleep out of my office. And that's when I go to my wife and say, honey, we're in trouble. Because we were $17 million in debt at that point, and we couldn't write a check for $17 million.
Creighton Cross, Woody Fincham, we are seeing significantly more REO work. Also, I agree tremendously on the issue previously, ARM loan products and lack of education. Luckily, we've had lower long-term mortgage products on the market now. And he also says short-term rentals, business value, and personal property must be considered. This has skewed the pricing in some of the more traditional tourism markets.
Right. So Creighton is one of my best friends in the whole world. He's down in Knoxville, Tennessee. Sorry, we wish you were in Virginia where we have better football teams, Creighton. But he works in Gatlinburg, which is I think is the largest short-term rental market in the country. Those things sell with pinball machines in them and arcade cabinets and furniture, the whole deal. So it's a crazy market down where they're at. REOs are picking up, but not to the degree that we saw. Keith had
It
mentioned.
was like $3 million at one point.
I mean,
It was a ridiculous number.
We're not worried about a lot of what we call shadow inventory, and that's inventory that banks are holding and waiting to release to the market. They all have some, but it's not.
But
a
maybe
high
is that
amount.
shadow inventory, it's not impacting our local market, so this is more of a macro
Sure.
comment. But I think there is a shadow inventory on the Blackstones that are holding a lot of rentals, right? And once the rental market starts adjusting at some point in time, they may be dumping stuff on the market, which could totally skew the market. Any concern about that?
I mean, I focus really where we are here,
Sure.
and because it's not in our market, I'm going to just say I can't really speak for other,
Got it.
regions and local markets. But I mean,
We're not seeing that here.
Yeah, I haven't seen it here. No.
I love it. Any closing
Well,
thought? Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I think one of our big challenges is a lot of times, especially in the more recent years, people purchasing an Airbnb are not treating it enough like a business. A lot of times there will be a property listed and it'll talk about the Airbnb and I'll ask about financials for that. And they do not exist, at least not readily in the moment.
Right.
And then when they do appear to me, I'm like, oh, I feel like this is not enough information. And then I'm wondering if these are actually accurate. And then there's the aspect of if you're using either VRBO or Airbnb, a lot of times it's a set it and forget it situation. Yes, you're making sure the cleaning is happening and all that transition, but as far as marketing and running a business and having a brand and all of those things, those are not part of most people's conversation that I've seen when they're running an Airbnb. So like I had an agent in the last 2 weeks come and talk to me, hey, their client's looking for an Airbnb. They're interested in creating that. Well, first, do you know your local regs? What are the laws? What are the codes? Can you do that? Can you do what you want to do there? And then also, are you willing to treat it like a business? Because let's say someone else has a past Airbnb on the market. Do you want to assume that that means it's not a good idea to have it in that location because, oh, they're selling it? Does that mean it's not working? Well, how did they work it? And how do you plan to work it too? It's kind of like people talking about, is it a good time to get into real estate? That depends, right? What are you going to do with it? There's always going to be someone who has a successful short-term rental. There will always be a successful trusted advisor out there. It's just, what do you want to do?
I think what you're getting at is there's a lack of objective risk analysis for most of those.
Oh, that
those
is
types
100% accurate. There is.
So to the bubble question, I think this is more of a bubble wrap, and there'll be individual micro markets that will not do well.
Right.
But it's not one big balloon that's going to pop on that end of it. And what I was thinking, Woody, most of the show when you said it earlier, there was a reason why the light bulbs weren't being made or the money they couldn't do that, because housing, at least in Virginia, is a second GDP, right? It's this housing footprint. What we all do at this table generates a second most amount of revenue for the state outside of the government. So when that blew up, it affected everybody.
Sure.
I think you're going to see this bubble wrap in certain, maybe it's Airbnb, maybe it's whatever. There's going to be certain small pops around here, but you're not going to see all of a sudden them all popping at once.
And
I
the
just
other
don't
thing you have to say too is that what's bad for one sector of the market is always good for another sector of the
100%.
market. So these companies that are buying up the Airbnbs and treating them as institutional investors, they're going to be, as my father would say, in the catbird seat.
Sure.
So.
I love it. I love it.
Awesome.
Today's show was awesome. This show is archived in totality at realtalkwithkeithsmith.com, presented by Yes Realty Partners and Keller Williams Alliance. Fincham & Associates is a fantastic partner of this show. If you go to the tab on realtalkwithkeithsmith.com, you'll see partners you can trust in the real estate supply chain. You see what we're all about. We went an hour and 30 minutes and we talked real estate and help you become a smarter buyer, seller. If you're looking for questions, comments, concerns, ideas, Keith and Yona Smith, Yes Realty Partners. Judah Wickhauer is the director for Keith Smith. Nikki Chambliss, Woody Fincham. I'm Jerry Miller. The I Love Seville show is up in 50 minutes. Take care, everybody. Well done. Very well done.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Awesome.
Awesome.
Woody, as always, thank you.
Yeah, it's always
Nikki,
fun.
as always, thank you.
Thank you.
Now on to